All right. Very happy to be here this afternoon. It's a great opportunity, I think, this initiative for us to work together across campus. I represent society as far as today is concerned, so any social questions you've got, just let me know. Any problems? Mike very kindly introduced himself as a plumber, and I'm trying to think what self-deprecatory way I can introduce myself. I stalk plumbers. I follow people like Mike around and try and understand the work they're doing and try and understand the social, political, ethical aspects of what seems to be fairly technical work. And a lot of big data stuff does seem to be very technical, but it's having a huge impact on us. If there's one message that I'm going to get across this afternoon, it's that big data, actually we've been in the epoch of big data since the late 18th, early 19th century. It's the development of the big censuses. The censuses are the mother of big data. And the census was introduced as a technique, largely a technique of government, an extremely good technique of government. It helps with epidemiology. It helps deciding about where we put houses, where we put schools. It helps control the population. Big data has grown up around that idea of control. Today, your average person, we are giving out so much data, so much about ourselves all of the time to so many people. And every time we do, we leave cookies. And the downside of this is the cookie monster is attacking us. The cookie monster is defining who we are, how other companies interact with us, how other people interact with us in the world. Increasingly, we're instrumenting ourselves as people. This is what I found a somewhat frightening survey. It's people doing wearable computing, especially for quantified self. If you don't know quantified self, it's all those things like Fitbit and I think the Apple Watch now does similar things where you monitor your heart rate, activity of various kinds, and you stream that to a website, which is then generally taken up by marketers. But they're asking, where would people like their wearable computing, their wearable sensor device? 3% wanted it tattooed on the skin. I hope that's none of you present in the audience today. But people have a great willingness to share data. We all have willingness to share data. We all do it willy-nilly, and I'm going to talk about the willy-nilly aspect in a few minutes. But what we're doing is we're creating these data doubles. And these data doubles stand in for us in the world. They have effects in the world. They are fundamentally part of who we are. So the idea that I am this person who's separate from my data, we just need to get away from that analytically. I am constituted by myself together with my data and the actions that my data is taking in the world. Now I'm going to concentrate today on 4 dimensions of big data, socially. Not that there's only 4 dimensions, it's just that I have difficulties with numbers bigger than 4. The first one is prediction. Many of you will know the target case, that's the case on the left, but I'm going to run through it slightly for you. A pregnant woman to a marketer is worth 200 people knowing the age, sex and location of 200 people. So it's a holy grail. You want to pick out a pregnant woman, get to them as soon as you possibly can, because they're going to be locking in buying habits which are going to work for the rest of their lives and going to work for their kids' lives. It's really, really important. And so Target developed a really nice algorithm for these unobtrusive measures about how do you know if someone's pregnant if they're not, kind of going out and buying baby bassinets or whatever it is parents buy? Well, at the start of the third, for example, at the start of the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, you generically go from scented lotions to unscented lotions. It's just, it's a correlation which exists. Taking sets of correlations like this, what Target was doing as a store was saying, okay, we can take this data and then we are going to send out flyers to potential pregnant mothers saying, have you considered this item? Have you considered that item? Congratulations on your pregnancy. And so this poor woman who was didn't particularly want to tell the parents she was pregnant, certainly hadn't got round to it yet, still living with them, gets all of these, gets bombarded with material from Target and I believe other stores saying, congratulations on your pregnancy. So father comes stomping up the stairs and says, what the hell's going on here? The point is, that data was out there and that data was manipulable and usable and affected her without any kind of control on her part, without her ability to exercise any kind of control over it. Which gets to the point on the right. Janet Vertesi, who was here at this campus for a number of years, Janet decided, well, okay, I'm going to try and hide the fact from all of these big data whales that I'm actually pregnant. So what she ended up doing, she had to use Tor a lot, she used cash a lot, she used things like Amazon gift cards a lot. She essentially built up a profile, which is the same profile that your average street criminal goes through when they can't use credit cards and they can't use kind of wide-in data. And so her question was, do I have to look like a criminal? Do I have to act like a criminal so that I can keep that data, which I think is my personal data? Nobody else has a right, particular right to know it, so I can keep it out of the hands of others. Prediction and big data is a really interesting area analytically. I'm not going to go through this particular case. This is courtesy of Jake Metcalf, my co-author of the paper. If you develop algorithms, effective algorithms, like in this case, it's actually a pretty good case. We can say you're likely to get a cardiac arrest in the next 24 hours, therefore let's take action now. But as we introduce more and more of that predictive algorithms into our healthcare system, and especially when we're dealing with psychotropic medications and potential psychiatric disorders, what happens if they say, you've got an 80 or 90% chance of undergoing massive depression in 10 or 15 years' time, therefore we're going to put you on the happy medications right away. In a sense, there's no way of testing that. The data itself, the algorithm itself, becomes the deciding factor. You can't question the algorithm, you're going to be put on the drugs, or your insurance company is going to complain about it. So that's prediction. Well, it's on the dark side. I think most of today's dark side, so I'll try and keep smiling while I'm talking. Control. This is an experiment that was carried out by Facebook recently. Many of you will have heard about it, but again, let me run through it. This is a figure from the original paper. What they do is they take people's streams and for the control group, which is the darker group, they don't affect the streams. If they, for others, they either increase the number of positive words or increase the number of negative words. That module that appeared in their streams, that modulation actually affects people's behavior. And so it's not, you can be nudged, you can be changed, you can be manipulated by the ways in which the big data is being presented, used, developed. And lots of money, obviously lots of development work going into that. Areas like behavioral economics really use big data for this kind of a purpose to get you to buy stuff. But you can also, obviously, see the policy questions here, the political questions that arise. How do we know that we're not having experiments carried out on us by other companies, groups like Google? Answer, we don't. We certainly know that Amazon carries out lots of experiments on us on a regular basis. What kind of control do we have over the experiments? Basically none. What kind of oversight process is there? They don't have IRBs. They have the ability now to develop techniques of large-scale social engineering without any discourse, without any public, and I'm going to get to public discourse in a minute, without any real public discourse about how is that engineering working and how should we as a population talk about it. Next I mentioned governance. It's incredibly difficult to manage and govern big data in reasonable ways. Here's one kind of a problem, no-fly list. someone who gets taken off the no-fly list in, I think, 2005, but her name has propagated over a whole set of other databases. So just getting it removed from the no-fly list does not end the problems in her life. Big data travels, it's aggregated, it's used, it's clustered, it's repackaged, it's resold. And you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, your credit report was wrong, we're going to change your credit report tomorrow. It's not like that with this kind of a case, and there have been a number of cases on the government no-fly lists where people are there by mistake. Getting them off it in the first place is difficult. Getting them off all of the relevant other databases, incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive. For those of you in the natural sciences, it's very, very similar. For example, in botany, when you try and change the genus of tomatoes, as they did several years ago, you can change the genus of tomatoes in a single database fairly quickly. To get it to propagate out over textbooks, over nurseries, so they change their seeds. Basically, a multi-billion-dollar exercise just to do a single name change. It costs a lot of money to have effective, good governance of these databases. Secondly, well, it's algorithms all the way down, isn't it? I mean, Google algorithm, Twitter algorithm. This is Twitter trending, where there was some yelps a little while ago about Occupy Wall Street, where folks are saying, well, actually, Occupy Wall Street is trending on Twitter, but it doesn't appear on Twitter trends. How do we know that? I mean, how do we say there's something wrong or unjust about the algorithm? The algorithm is proprietary. We don't have control over it. We don't have access to it as members of the public. Google algorithm. Google is in many ways, actually even without them wanting to do evil, and that's a moot point, but there is evil which comes out. There are bad effects which come out of the Google algorithm. One bad effect, for example, is that if you want to find out about a place in Africa, you're much more likely to pull up the CIA World Handbook about that African country than any site that actually comes from Africa. That's just a part of the Google algorithm, the Matthew effect, to them that hath should be given. So if you've got most sites coming in, that's what's going to go up. But again, Google is not going to release its algorithm or algorithms to you for public access and public debate. And even if we had public access and public debate, how would we actually talk about this? Most people don't have the technical education to really get the details, the points at which political decisions are making, the points at which these algorithms are starting to make fundamental effects on your lives. So we've got this phenomenon, which is a huge and sprawling phenomenon, but it's very, very difficult for us to actually think about governing it. So let's move on to the question of public oversight. Well, the first is the bloody EULAs. I mean, you've all dealt with EULAs, end-user license agreements. I could do a show of hands, but I'm not feeling particularly schoolmasterly this afternoon. Most people don't read EULAs. I certainly don't. I pay no attention to it. There's a thing actually in the trade that we call the privacy paradox. That if you go around, lots of folks, they say, we really, really care about privacy. If you look at their actions, they don't. They do nothing to protect their privacy. And that same paradox is actually there. I mean, we did a poll, I was with a group of privacy researchers lately, and we did the hands up on that. And again, we all said we really cared about privacy, and none of us actually read the EULAs. Now, there are issues there. There are ways of designing EULAs so that they're much more understandable, much more accessible and amenable, and much more controllable. But the other side of it is, if I want to get the full function out of my Android phone or my Apple phone or whatever, if I want to get full functionality, I actually need to say yes to a whole bunch of apps. Otherwise, I just can't use it intelligently and well. Otherwise, I'm stuck like Janet Vertesi, having to go to a cash machine and draw out cash all the time to get money. What kinds of control can we talk about that? What kind of mechanism of oversight can we put into control so that we're not doing bad things, not having bad things done with our data, so that we're understanding where our data is going and being used. There are actually some models right now which suggest micropayments for data. So if big industry is going to be using your data, you should get a micropayment back, which I think would be quite an interesting challenge. But generically, public oversight, very, very difficult. Porrick had an earlier version of this, or another version of this chart a little bit earlier in his talk, the hockey stick graph. World temperature since the year 1250. You see the spike starts up around the Industrial Revolution time here, and then gets bigger and bigger, and we're sort of taking off after World War II. And the problem with these graphs is you always want to do better and better. The significant thing here is that lots of climate change data is uncertain data. We're dealing with uncertainty here. And lots of big data falls into this generic camp. It's not definite data about the world, but it seems to be hyper-real because there's so damn much of it. And it can be presented in such incredibly effective and efficient means that we think this is producing a full picture of the world. So one of the issues with climate science, I think, and around the public oversight and public accountability is not that we should say, believe the scientists, 99.99% of scientists believe in climate change. They are certain, therefore we should be certain. And then you get the scandals like ClimateGate saying, well, the data is actually uncertain and they're smudging over certain difficulties and they're smoothing various curves. We need a public that understands that data itself is uncertain and understands the uncertainties in the databases, understands what can and cannot be done with data. You couldn't imagine sending a child to school today not learning how to read a book. Unfortunately, you can absolutely imagine children going to school not learning how to read and understand databases, even though databases are fundamental parts of our political, social, ethical, cultural process. All right, got 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to skip this, very quickly on this. Satellite map over Munich. Satellite imagery, really interesting. Streaming data, obviously, drones going overhead, fleets of satellites up in space right now. Fridge-shaped, which will give you static images, or slightly larger, garage-shaped, which will give you streaming images. We are getting vast streaming images over the Earth. Now, there's ways in which that data can be incredibly valuable used for humanitarian purposes. If we want to track deforestation, if we want to track what's happening around Superfund sites and things like that. That same data can be used really, really badly. If you've got a really good satellite data and you're sitting up over, over somebody's house, a paedophile can take a look down and say, oh look, there's kiddie toys there littering the lawn, and use that as a place to possibly target the population. Same data, same database. Good use, bad use. How do you deal with that? What's the politics around that? You can't just say, really do no evil doesn't do it. But what is the due process? How are we going to develop a society that can there's no guarantees, but can move towards good uses for big data and mitigate against bad uses for big data? The final public process thing, 1 minute. All right, the final public process thing, very quickly, is the census data. Census data during World War II. It was very easy for the Germans to find and round up Jews in Holland. Very difficult for them to do it in France. The reason why: French don't trust their government. They tend to lie to the census takers. The Dutch like their government. They're good social democrats. They basically gave accurate data. The lesson here, even if you trust the government now, and even if you trust the data uses that are being made in the present, you have to remember that we're making decisions now around data which will affect us for the next 50 years or however long you choose to live. Okay, conclusion. I'm working together with Kate Krupp and Helen Nissenbaum on a council for big data ethics and society. I've got no more advertising time than that. But if any of you are interested, we'd love to tell you more about our work. We're particularly interested in the council at actually getting down to the technical levels and understanding what's going on technically and how social, political, ethical values are really wrapped into the algorithms that are being built and so forth. So finally, living with big data. Yes, we're living with big data. We're in a world of big data. We need to develop a public polity and a discourse which enables us to act well and live well in that world. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll take one question for Jeff. Let me open it up then for the last few minutes before we take our break for questions for all four of our speakers. That I think was a very interesting, diverse set of talks. So Pierre, Hal, Jeff, if you have questions for any of those folks, we have about 5 minutes. Very quiet audience today. Yes.
So my question for Jeff is, has there been any work in the area? So there is all this data, and institutions and companies and businesses use it for their own benefit, not necessarily for ours, though government should be. Has there been any work done to harvest and mine this data to expose actually the real intention, for example, of politicians that put ads and connect these and show a picture of what is behind a certain statement, a certain decision, a certain advertisement, a certain publication or article written by somebody? This is my question, I don't know if any work has been done in this area.
Yes, I mean that's a lovely question. I guess two answers to that. It is way interesting to be able to go back and see what the data source is for generalization in general, and that's one of the great things that's happening in science publishing right now. Is that in areas like the Protein Data Bank, printing protein sequences, or the Ecological Society of America, you print an article, you lodge the database at the same time, so that actually users can, are not bound by the statements and assertions that are made in the paper. They can actually go burying into the data. And there's lots of, I'm not going to go into the difficulties because there are lots of problems with the ways in which that's working, but it's a really, really nice model. Now, as far as how companies are doing or how politicians are doing and what data they're basing their decisions on, I don't know of any particular studies of the type you mentioned. I think it will be incredibly valuable. It's very, very hard to get that kind of information. For companies, it's proprietary information. They're generically not going to release the data that they've got, how they use it, how they process it, what their algorithms are. So the way of testing an algorithm for a company is basically you fire stuff at it, and then you see what happens. So you fire information of one kind or another, create these different possible cells, and then you see what comes back if you've got this representation as opposed to that representation. So it's a fairly indirect form of measure, but very difficult to do, but I think absolutely vital that we develop techniques for doing it.
I was wondering if you have investigated the question as to whether an individual has some sort of copyright, perhaps legal, perhaps not legal, but some sort of copyright to data about themselves.
Within the policy world, that's been bleated about. Folks are talking about that. The actual model for it is a little bit difficult. I mean, like when I came out with that statement about pregnant women, pregnant women is worth 200 other folks like you and me. You know, how do you actually, you know, find out what value is coming from a particular item of your data? And if you're in a big data set, we are talking micro value here. In principle, I think there's nothing that stops it legally from looking at it as your own data and something which you own. The EULAs are written in such a way, the EULAs that none of us read, are written in such a way that we give away those rights. You know, we accept that it will be sold on, it will be used in other ways. So the push really needs to be a policy push for people to come and recognise, no, my data is valuable, I should be rewarded for the use of it. And that needs to be a common decision, because one person like, you know, Matt Beats over there hanging out and saying, well, I'm not giving them my data, they say, who cares? And you know, it's like we've got everyone else in the room. So it really needs to be an across-the-board policy decision that's made. But there is work going on there. I'm not seeing it really eventuating in much right now.
One last question before we break. For any of our speakers?
Yeah, I was wondering, I have a question for Pierre Baldy. I was wondering if you could say a few words about how you adapt the deep learning architectures for different domains.
Well, there's a lot of know-how that goes into the design of the architecture. So, of course, for a given domain, you have to see, for instance, what are the group invariances. If you're doing vision, for instance, you want recognition to be invariant with respect to translation. And there is ways of building this invariance into the architectures. It's called weight sharing. So, you know, there's quite a bit of knowledge on how you design deep architectures for a particular domain. You know, there's recursive neural networks, etc., etc. I don't have the time to go into those details. But if you have a specific application in mind, I'll be delighted to talk to you.
I would like to thank the four speakers. I think that was a very interesting session. When I put it together.